December part 2. So this is the answer sheet that you're going to need from your new homework package. December part 2, you have 4 questions. What one thing brought back the meaning of Christmas and Hanukkah? Why did no one laugh? What did my thee whisper? What kind of lie? The whole of December could have been ruined because of the yellow tights, except for one thing. One glorious, amazing, unbelievable, spectacular thing. The one thing that kept us going in the bare, holidayless classroom of Mrs. Baker. The one thing that brought back the meaning of Hanukkah and Christmas. Mickey Mantle. That's number 1. The greatest player to put on Yankee pinstripes since Babe Ruth. Mickey Mantle. And it was Mrs. Baker who announced his advent. I suppose it will be of some interest to you, she said, that Mickey Mantle is coming to town next week. The class went as silent as if Sycorax and Caliban, the rats, not the monsters, had appeared before us, clacking their appalling yellow teeth. Some interest, said Danny Hepfer. To some of us? I said. Who's Mickey Mantle? Asked merrily. Who Mickey Mantle? Asked Mythie. He is a baseball player, said Mrs. Baker. He is the baseball player, said Danny Hepfer. He had a batting average of .245 this year, said Doug Switek. We all turned to look at him. Down from .288 last year, Doug Switek said. What's a batting average? Asked Merrilee. My brother-in-law, said Mrs. Baker loudly, has developed strong ties to the Yankee organization. He's arranged for Mickey Mantle to come to the Baker Sporting Emporium. I am told that in addition to strutting around swinging baseball bats as if it were a worthy vocation, he will sign baseballs for anyone willing to bring one to him. A cheer from the class, as if the happy holidays were already here. This is not an occasion to clamber onto your desk, Mr. Hupfer. You should tell your parents that he is coming a week from this Saturday night, and that he will be swinging bats and signing baseballs from 8 o'clock until 9:30. You should all take note that had he been swinging bats and signing baseballs on a school night, I never would have agreed to make this announcement. Another cheer, wild and extravagant. Who is Mickey Mantle? Asked Merrilee again. We all ignored her. Mickey Mantle. Now, things would have been fine if Mrs. Baker had just left it there. I mean, Mickey Mantle coming to the Baker Sporting Emporium and all, but she didn't. I have a second announcement, said Mrs. Baker. We all got quiet again. Is someone else coming to the Emporium too? Asked Danny Hepfer. Maybe someone I know? Asked Mary Lee. No one else is coming, unless you want to say that someone is up and coming. That was a teacher joke. No one laughed, even though we were supposed to, because no one ever laughs at teacher jokes. That's number 2. I have been informed by Mr. Goldman, who is the president of the Long Island Shakespeare Company, that one of the students in our class will be performing in the company's holiday extravaganza this year. He will be playing a part from The Tempest. I knew what was coming next. For a while I had wondered if Mrs. Baker had stopped hating my guts. Now I figure she hadn't. As the corresponding secretary of the company, I invite you all to come and see Mr. Holling Hoodhood in his Shakespeare debut. It will be a week from this Saturday, the very same night that the eminent Mr. Mantle will be at the Emporium swinging his bats. The performance should be finished 30 minutes before Mr. Mantle makes his exit, so you will all have time for both. Toads, beetles, bats. The only thing worse would have been if she found a way to bribe them to come, maybe with cream puffs. And for those who attend, said Mrs. Baker, your ticket stub will bring you extra credit for your next English for You and Me assignment. It was worse. Mrs. Baker looked at me and smiled. It was like the smile she had before Doug Switek's brother's assassination attempt. And shouldn't someone have told me that Mrs. Baker was the corresponding secretary? This is the part where, if we lived in a just world, some natural disaster would occur right then, or maybe an atomic bomb attack to obliterate the news of the Long Island Shakespeare Company's holiday extravaganza, and so save me from my undeserved humiliation. Still, Even though there wasn't a natural disaster or atomic bomb attack, Mickey Mantle was almost enough. After all, with Mickey Mantle coming, no one really cared about my Shakespeare debut. No one except Mara Lee, who didn't know who Mickey Mantle was, and Mai Thi, who also didn't know who Mickey Mantle was, and Danny Hupfer, who did know who Mickey Mantle was. And they all cornered me after lunch. "Why so sneaky?" asked Mara Lee. "Are you playing a girl's part?" "No, I'm not playing a girl's part. It's a part from The Tempest," I said. "Gee, so when Mrs. Baker said you were playing a part from The Tempest, she meant that you were really playing a part from The Tempest," said Danny Hupfer. "We know a whole lot more now than we did before." "Ariel. I'm going to play Ariel." "That's a girl's name," said Mara Lee. "Isn't that a girl's name?" "Suspicion is an unbecoming passion," I said. "Ariel is a warrior." I know. Kind of sounds like a lie. But Presbyterians know that every so often a lie isn't all that bad, and I figured this was about the best place it could happen. Who does the warrior fight? The rebels who usurped Prospero's kingdom and who want to murder him and his daughter. "That sounds all right," says Danny Hupfer. "So you get to fight for them like a knight who's their champion?" "Yes." "And you get to wear armor and stuff like that," said Danny Hupfer. "Stuff like that," I said. "Maybe I'll come then to see the armor," he said, "but it better be over in time for Mickey Mantle." "Still sounds like a girl's name to me," said Mara Lee. We ignored her again and headed back into the classroom. But just before we got to the door, Mai Thi stopped. She put a hand on my chest. She looked at me for a long moment and then whispered, "Not good to be warrior." That's number 3. I looked at her, I guess kind of startled, and she went to her desk before I could say anything. But what did she know? At the next rehearsal, I asked Mr. Goldman if Ariel could wear armor instead of yellow tights. "Armor? We have no armor," said Mr. Goldman. "You have no armor? What do you do in a play if you need it?" "We don't put those plays on. We should buy armor just to do Julius Caesar." "No." "And why should Ariel wear armor?" "Because he's Prospero's champion. He's fighting like a jousting knight." Mr. Goldman shook his head. "Like a jousting knight? Holling, you are a fairy. Go put on your tights. We have dress rehearsal." I didn't get to wear any armor. The next Wednesday, as soon as everyone left for Temple Beth El and St. Adalbert's, Mrs. Baker took out her copy of Shakespeare from the lower drawer in her desk. "Mr. Goldman says that you are doing very well, though you need some practice on interpretation." He said that? He did. "Open your book to the 4th act. I'll be Prospero. We'll start with, 'What would my potent master?' and continue through to the end. Begin." He really said I was doing very well, and that you need some practice. Begin. "What would my potent master?" I said. No, Mr. Hoodhood. You are an enslaved magical creature, about to be given your freedom if you perform well these last few moments. You, however, sound as if you're waiting for the crosstown bus. You're almost free, but not quite." "What would my potent master?" I said. Mrs. Baker crossed her arms. "There is supposed to be a passion in your face that works you strongly. You're on a knife's edge." "What would my potent master?" I said. "Indeed, there you are," said Mrs. Baker. "Stay on the knife's edge. And now Prospero." I stayed on the knife's edge because I couldn't help it. When Mrs. Baker read Prospero's part, it was like Prospero himself had come into the classroom with his flowing cloak and magical hands. She was Prospero and I was Ariel. And when she gave me my last command and said, "Be free and fare thou well," I suddenly knew what Ariel felt. The whole world had just opened out in front of me, and I could go wherever I wished and be whatever I wanted. Absolutely free. I could decide my own happy ending for myself. "That," said Mrs. Baker, "should please Mr. Goldman." And it did. When we finished rehearsal that night, I could almost imagine myself leaping out into the airy elements and dropping the insubstantial pageant of life behind me. At least that's what it felt like on the stage. It didn't feel like that in Camillo Junior High, when Mrs. Baker reminded the class to purchase tickets in advance.